Welcome to the ExecMBA podcast. I'm your host, Brett Twitty, and you are listening to a new episode. On this episode of the podcast, I'm excited to share a recent webinar that we've decided to convert into a podcast. This is a conversation with students in our Executive MBA program discussing the first year or the core curricular period of the program. I think you're really going to enjoy this conversation. And as always, if this conversation is helpful for you, please like this episode and subscribe to the ExecMBA podcast so you never miss an update. And remember, you can always check the episode description for links to Darden blogs, social channels, and more. And now, without further ado, here's a conversation with students in our Executive MBA program discussing the first year or the core curricular period of the program. Well, welcome everyone. My name is Brett Twitty. I'm the Managing Director of Admissions for the Professional Degree Programs here at the Darden School of Business. That includes our Executive MBA program, which we're going to talk about this evening, as well as our part-time MBA and MSBA programs, all working professional programs, all based here in the Washington, D.C. area. So to give you a little bit of an overview of the structure of this conversation. So this conversation is about the first year experience in the Executive MBA program, and we're going to be joined by a number of current students to talk about their experience in the first year. Some first years, some second years should be here on the call with us. But the first 10 minutes or so, I want to talk about just the basic structure of our program, just so you understand how the program works, the schedule, these kinds of things, so that when you're hearing the current students talk, you have a little bit more context for what they're sharing. So let's get into it. And we're going to start very high level, and then we'll start to get a little bit more into the details. For some of you, this may be review. If you've joined us for an Executive MBA overview webinar, you've likely heard some of this before, but there's a lot of details, a lot of ins and outs, what have you here. So just want to make sure we're all on the same page. So we have an Executive MBA program that has two formats within it. We have an Executive MBA or EMBA format and a Global Executive MBA or GEMBA format. If you come for a weekend residency, you come for a class visit, for example, and you are there, you won't know who's an EMBA or a GEMBA student unless you actually ask them. And everybody's part of the same class. They're all moving through the program together. The big difference between these two formats is the number of global residencies that are required. EMBA format students are required to participate in 1 week-long global residency. This is a 1.5 credit-bearing course that is delivered in any number of countries across the world. Typically, we'll travel to about 8 to 10 different global residency locations with a particular Executive MBA class. That will be the options that the students will have to preference. GEMBA format students are required to participate in 4 of these week-long global residencies. That's the big difference. The program itself is 21 months, start to finish. Everybody enrolls in August, and you finish 21 months later in May, and it's a hybrid program. It's 2/3 in person, 1/3 online. We'll talk about the schedule a little bit more in a subsequent slide, but just keep that in mind that there's both in-person and virtual elements of the program. The program is based in Roslyn, as we noted, and touch points down in Charlottesville. If you're kind of imagining the schedule that you're going to have as an Executive MBA student, you have 2 week-long residencies. You have one at the beginning of the program and one at the end of the program, what are called Leadership Residency 1 and Leadership Residency 2. They effectively bracket the 10 2-month quarters, the sort of real core of the program. It's kind of the first and last thing you do. And it's nice to start in Charlottesville and end in Charlottesville as an Executive MBA student. Nice symmetry there. And this is a cohort-based program, meaning that all students are proceeding through the curriculum in their work together as a group. We typically, in a typical Executive MBA class, will have about 120 or so students. 120, 130, somewhere in that neighborhood. As we'll talk about tonight, you're going to be broken into sections during the core curriculum, that first year of the program. But so you're not going to have class with 120 students, if you're wondering. But that's the typical class size. And so when we say cohort-based, we mean start and end with the same group of people. The first year is lockstep, meaning everybody's taking the same classes. But in the second year, there's more flexibility. That's a little bit beyond the scope of our conversation tonight, but you should absolutely come back for our electives conversation in a couple weeks to hear from the second year students about the elective experience. I'll say that there's more customization, personalization than you might imagine in that second year of the Executive MBA program when you think about a cohort-based experience. And then everybody graduates with the same degree. We have 4 formats of 1 MBA here at Darden. We have a full-time MBA, part-time MBA, Executive MBA, and Global Executive MBA formats. Everybody graduates with the same degree. So you know already the 2 week-long residencies in Charlottesville. The core of your schedule is really built around these once-a-month weekend residencies with online class a couple nights per week. The weekend residencies are on average 1 weekend per month. There are 20 of them over the course of the 21 months of the program. We'll talk a little bit about the quarter structure in the next slide. But just know that you're going to have 20 weekend residencies again, on average, 1 weekend per month. The weekend residencies are Friday, Saturday, and Sunday, with Friday activities really beginning around 11 a.m. with a brunch period and then a time for announcements, what's called homeroom, and then class starts on Friday at noon and goes to about 6 p.m. On Friday evening. Saturday's the longest day. It's from around 8:20 in the morning to about 5:30 p.m. And then Sunday, it's from around 8:20 in the morning to 3 p.m. Over the course of that weekend residency, you would expect to have somewhere in the neighborhood of about 12 to 13 class sessions. You're typically taking 3 courses at a time as an executive MBA student, so you would have some combination of those courses over the course of the weekend residency. On Friday, sort of drilling down a little bit, on Friday, you would have 4 class sessions. On Saturday, you typically have 5 class sessions. And on Sunday, you would have 4 class sessions. That's the basic breakdown of a typical weekend residency here. Online class, as you can see, a couple nights per week. The first year of the program is core curriculum. Everybody's taking the same classes. You would expect to have online class on Tuesday and Thursday evenings from 7 to 8:30 p.m. Or so. These are live synchronous sessions. Now, it's worth noting that you won't have online class, these distance sessions, the week leading up to a weekend residency. So people always ask, you know, typical month, what would be my commitment in terms of this sort of distance component? Well, let's assume that month has 4 weeks, kind of a typical average month. One of those weekends, you would have a weekend residency, so no distance classes that week, but you would have distance classes in the other weeks. And so again, 2 nights for each of those weeks, about 6 distance sessions in a weekend residency in an average month. That's one way to sort of conceptualize it. And then, as mentioned, MBA format students are required to participate in 1 week-long global residency. MBA format students required to participate in 4 week-long global residencies. Always funny to me to say required in this way because, like, you get to go on an incredible course in a place that's really interesting. You're meeting business leaders. You're doing all these things that you cannot do as a tourist in just visiting this country. You're going to visit companies, meeting with business leaders. You're having cultural experiences. These are once in a lifetime course experiences, but yet still a requirement. So we have to express it in that way. But most students who go on one want to go on more than one. So if you're an MBA format student and you're wondering, can I add a second or third or even work up to the GIMBA designation, you absolutely can. If you are a little bit nervous, like you're interested in GIMBA, but you're not sure if you can do 4 global residencies, know that when you apply, you're applying to the Executive MBA program. You're not applying to a particular format. If you're admitted, you'll be given your choice of formats, and it's at the time of making your decision that you actually choose your format. And there's still some opportunity to shift around, even after making that election. Still some opportunity to shift around until probably about early July or so. Even if you start the program as a GIMBA format student and you find you can't participate in 4 global residencies, say life happens, work happens, you can always shift to MBA. That happens from time to time with students. And you also have the option as an MBA format student to participate in 4 global residencies, to travel 4 times and work your way up to the GIMBA designation. So there's even some fluidity between these two formats post-matriculation. All right, so a little bit more detail here about the structure of the program. You're going to really measure your life as an executive MBA student in 2-month quarters. So every couple of months, you're going to get new classes. As I mentioned before, you're typically taking 3 courses at a time. 21-month program, it's got 10 2-month quarters, and 2 quarters equals a semester here. Why do the semesters matter? Well, the semesters matter because that's really going to be it's going to align with your billing dates here at the University of Virginia. So you're going to have a bill that's due prior to the start of school in August, prior to that fall semester, and then essentially your billing dates are going to track the subsequent semesters. There's 5 semesters over the course of the program. The first year is core curriculum. First 12 months, 6 quarters, core curriculum. Everybody's taking the same classes, moving through that together. The second year, primarily electives. There are a few required courses, a continuation of the sort of professional development, career development track that's called experiential learning. But by and large, the second year is electives. And I mentioned before, there's some flexibility in that second year for students, both in terms of the distance class nights, right? So Tuesday, Thursdays during the core, but when you get to electives, distance nights can vary depending upon the electives that you choose. So there's some electives that have distance nights on Mondays, some on Tuesdays, some on Wednesdays, some on Thursdays. And then there are also some classes that meet only on Fridays for the in-person component, some classes that meet on Saturday and Sunday mornings, and some classes that meet on Saturday and Sunday afternoons. There's also asynchronous electives. There are also independent studies. You could take a part-time MBA elective. You could participate in a short January term elective. There's a lot of flexibility, a lot of opportunity, as I mentioned, for customization and personalization. So as you think about the Executive MBA program, you would likely want to think about it as kind of two phases. First, kind of being the core phase, and then the next phase being the elective phase, and that the sort of they're distinct from one another. And when it comes to this sort of schedule component, because of the flexibility and customization that you see for the second year. Students take 12 electives in the second year of the program, and we do have focus areas. So if you take 3 courses that fall within the focus areas, that one of the focus areas that are listed on our website, you would earn that focus area. But Darden is a general management school. There's not an emphasis here around concentrating or specializing in the elective period. These are kind of here if you want to take advantage of them. And so just to, again, give us a little bit more context for our discussion tonight, which is really going to be about the first year experience here. So this is what we're talking about, these first 12 months. So you can see typically 3 classes at a time. You'd be wondering about business fundamentals. This is a self-paced course, 1.5 credits. You have Leadership Residency 1, which of course is the first thing you do, Leadership Residency 2 here. But you can see this is the core. Summer semester, things are a little bit different here in Q6, taking 2 classes, but by and large, 3 classes at a time. And you have January term here in your first year. Between the fall and spring semester, you take a required credit-bearing career-focused course called a Professional Advancement course. This is delivered online, although there is an in-person day where you can come and participate in person. We had over 100 students across both Executive MBA and Part-Time MBA here just back in January for that in-person day. It's a great course in that you get credit for beginning to engage with your career and where you would like to go. So this is what we're going to be talking about this evening. And this other is sort of just an example of a Gimbo format schedule. Again, this is no difference here. What you'll notice here a bit different is that all of these global residency travel periods are lit up for the Gimbo format student. And because every global residency beyond the one required global residency effectively counts as an elective, even though it's required to be a Gimbo format student, it can lighten your elective load here in the elective quarters, is what you're seeing from this shading. And I just wanted to mention that. And we talked a little bit earlier about the weekend residencies of what you can expect. This is a mock-up of a weekend residency. So some of the things you might hear about tonight as we're talking about the first year experience, you might hear about Friday Night Live, for example, or FNL, these sort of social, sort of co-curricular experiences that happen on Friday evenings where there's oftentimes speakers that come in or panel discussions. Oftentimes the career team will host a lunch and learn or some sort of educational programming around the weekend residency. And then there's also social experiences the students can coordinate on their own. There's what's called the Executive MBA Student Association. There's section representatives as well for each of the sections. Lots of opportunities to be engaged and play a leadership role with your class if you want to. But this gives you a sense of a typical weekend residency. And you can see the students are divided into sections, section A, section B. You would stay in one classroom the entire time. The faculty rotate between the classrooms, typically about 60 students or so in a section, and we shuffle the sections every semester. So fall semester, you would be in one section, then there'd be some shuffling, spring semester, a different section, and then summer semester, a different section. That shuffling happens twice. And of course, after you finish the summer semester, you're into the elective period, and sections don't really apply anymore. So a lot of detail there. But again, the goal with that is to give context for the conversation that we're going to have this evening. And so we're joined by a couple of our current students. We have a student from our first year class, the Executive MBA class of 2026, and we also have a student from our Executive MBA class of 2025 at the very end of his program, Jordan Gladman. So Janie, Jordan, thank you so much for being here. And I think we also have another student who's also here. So give me a second, Janie. Why don't I ask you to introduce yourself? Tell us a little bit more about who you are and your background, and I'll get things organized.
Sure. Thanks, Brett. I'm Janie. I'm in the EMBA class of 2026. So we are just finishing Q3 right now. So we're about to have Q3 finals. And I am an operations technical manager and process improvement professional. It's been my career. I worked in the US Navy in nuclear and in the UK in water and utilities and in most recently in tech startup. And I've been at the University of Virginia now, and it's been fantastic. That's a little about me.
All right. Thank you so much, Janie. Jordan, why don't you tell us a little bit about you?
Hi, everyone. I am Jordan Gladman. I am EMBA 25, which means I am in my final, well, I'm in the exam week for, it must be Q9, going into the final quarter of the program. So that is very exciting for me. I, uh, my background, my first career, if you will, was in biomedical science. I got my PhD and did, classical bench research with animals, trying to understand muscular dystrophies. From there, I transitioned into the federal government and worked for the National Institutes of Health and discovered I really like this more operational business side of activities. And that's what drew me to University of Virginia Darden School of Business. And for the last, must be 20 months now, have been enjoying my cohort and learning new things.
All right. Thank you so much. We've got a couple more panelists here. Fabian, can I come to you next?
Thanks, Brett, and apologies for being late. Nice to meet you all. My name is Fabian Seaton. I am in Janie's cohort. She actually sits like one row ahead of me this quarter. I spent the first decade of my career working in Democratic politics on the Hill and campaigns. I currently lead the advocacy team for Constellation Energy, which is the largest nuclear operator in the country. So Janie and I actually talk a lot about how people in her role get annoyed by people in my role. And I came to Darden. Really what sold me was the case method. It just fits the way I learn. I know that given the time constraints of working, family, and school, I would get a lot more out of the case method than, a more traditional classroom setting.
All right. And last but not least, Svetla Jacques is here, a member of our second year class, Jordan's classmate.
Yeah.
Svetla, can I come to you next?
Yes, thank you. Thank you, Brett. And hi, Jordan. Hi, everyone. I am just like Jordan, very excited to near the end of our journey, which has been very exciting. I am probably an outlier. I am one of the older students, if you will, in our cohort. I have worked in the legal field for over 25 years. I have done a lot of litigation. I'm a paralegal. Then I transitioned more into the management part of the business, and I've been managing a small law firm for a long time. And I found myself sort of reaching a ceiling to where there really wasn't any more room for me to grow at this current state. So I was looking to do personal growth. I looked at Darden, of course. I had no questions. This was the school I wanted to go to. The executive program offered the flexibility that I needed. I'm also a single parent, so that helped me as well. It was close to my job here in DC, and I couldn't tell you how many more great things have come with that I wasn't even aware.
All right. And I'll just mention, if you have questions for our panelists, we got a lot of experts here, a lot of great insights I'm sure we'll cover over the next 40 or so minutes. But if you have questions, please ask via the Q&A. I want to make sure that you're getting your questions answered. I see we have a question about independent study, which I mentioned as being an elective option. It is typically a quarter in duration is how long the independent study lasts. I see we've got that question. So, all right. So let's talk a little bit about the preparation for getting ready to start. This is always a lot of feelings, a swirl of emotion. Jordan, can I come to you first? Like, how were you feeling prior to starting your executive MBA program? Was there anything that you were unsure about, and anything that you did to prepare yourself?
So I like to worry, and the good news is I didn't need to, but I still do it. I attended all of the town halls, or almost all of the town halls. There was an online module you could take. I tried, doing that, playing with the different questions they asked, understanding how Excel worked. And then there was Darden before Darden, and I also attended that. by the end of it, I felt much more confident, especially the Darden before Darden. It really kind of centered me and saw that I was in fact able to, figure out this business side of the private sector, which was, I think, my biggest worry from mostly coming from the public sector space.
Yeah, I appreciate the shout out to Darden before Darden. It's been growing in popularity amongst our incoming part-time and executive MBA students. This is a series of both I would say, series of like live synchronous online sessions as well as in-person sessions that we offer typically in mid to late July for incoming executive MBA and part-time MBA students. It's not recommended necessarily for everyone. It's generally recommended most for students who have very little background in things like finance, accounting, economics, maybe statistics, some of the decision analysis work that you might do, just intended to give you some exposure to these things. It's not intended to help you master this stuff. It's intended to at least give you some exposure to some of the vocab, terminology, concepts that you're going to see in these classes. We also have some asynchronous materials, as Jordan mentioned. So if you're concerned about getting prepared for the start of school, know that there's going to be resources that will roll out for our incoming students. So whether you're a prospective or an admitted student, know that we have those resources for you, including Darden before Darden, which is really, really ramped up over the past 3-4 years. Fabian, can I come to you next? How are you feeling before the start of school? Was there anything you were unsure about? How did you prepare yourself?
I was unsure about all of it. That's the truth. Darden before Darden definitely helped. I think for me, really, it's realizing that everyone was in the same boat, right? So, if it's a program targeting people who have been out of undergrad for, over a decade, some less, right? Some more, but that was it for me, right? Like over a decade. And realizing that when they talk about, the need to teach you the intuition behind stuff versus trying to make you an accountant, and the importance of the case method and going through cases in class, and realizing that that's just not like marketing MBS, right? Like it just makes it a lot easier to process. And it's like, oh, I'm not expected to come in here and learn accounting in 8 weeks or however long our quarters are. Right. And Darden before Darden kind of like explained that a bit, where like the professors really hammer home. They're like, hey, I want you to learn the intuition if you're managing people who have this skill set, knowing what to look out for, etc. So you don't have to like come in thinking, oh my God, like how am I gonna learn all this? Like no one's expecting you to be an accountant after 8 weeks. Right. And I feel like that was something that I wish I knew even sooner. So I wouldn't like be nervous, right? Because it's like, oh, if it's just like understanding like not just broad strokes, but like understanding the relationship between ideas and how they fit within, just any organization whose job it is to turn a profit. You just realize that it's not as hard as you think it is. It's time consuming, and it is a lot, especially if you haven't encountered it before. But it's feasible, right? Like the expectations are such that you can achieve this in 8 weeks.
Yeah, I appreciate that emphasis on the sort of managerial perspective. I think that's something to keep in mind, right? We're not trying to make you a CPA or a CFA. It's to help you have a perspective on these things, to understand what to look out for, Fabian mentioned. But it's very much the managerial perspective that's emphasized in the classroom. Svetla, can I come to you next? What were you feeling unsure about as you prepare to start school? Do you take any steps to help get yourself ready? Anything that was on your mind?
Thank you. Just like everyone else, I also, well, first of all, I'm a perfectionist. So just going into it, I was so scared, and I wanted to make sure that I can be on par with all the rest of the students. So I, like everyone else, attended all the town halls. I did the Darden before Darden, and I highly recommend it, even if you feel comfortable. It kind of gives you sort of a tasting of what class will be like, what learning will be like. So it sort of gives you a sort of refresher to school and learning and doing homework and that sort of thing. It also provided me with an idea what it would be like managing learning coursework with family and full-time work. So I highly recommend it. But yes, I was very nervous. How am I going to cope with all these quant classes and everybody coming in who has PhDs like Jordan and all these other things? So I was very nervous, but don't worry, everyone will do just fine.
All right. Janie, how about you? How are you feeling before you started?
I echo everybody else, and I think this is like universal talking to the rest of our peers. Actually, we were talking about it a quarter, like in our leadership communications class. We were just talking about how we felt when we started in Charlottesville that first week. So some of us had done Darden before Darden, which 10 out of 10 recommend in terms of understanding how the classes are going to be. But even if you didn't do that, LR1 is structured. That's that first week in Charlottesville. It's the leadership residency. It's structured such to get us all on the same page. It gets us all aligned in terms of like values, what this program is about, how we communicate with each other, and how the case method works. So what preparation you need to do to be able to be present and ready in the classroom to participate, and how to listen to your peers to get the most out of the program. But I think we were all super nervous and we all got through that together. And I think that's a kind of coming from that same place of we all have very different backgrounds. Like, I have a background in engineering, so like the Excel part's not scary, but I don't know anything about marketing or anything that Fabian does. The you know, corporate communications, the one of the people on my learning team, he works in external affairs. He's a lawyer background, like completely coming from completely different spaces than I'm coming from, but we all have big areas that we're trying to learn. That's why we're here. So everyone was nervous coming into it, and we all got guided through that process of how we needed to show up. And I think, coming into after LR1, we started the first quarter and we were all kind of ready to participate and to do things that we had never done before. Which is why we're in this program, is to broaden our horizons and get that managerial view of these topics which aren't our specialty. Like didn't know anything about economics going into it. And I came out of that class able to talk to a friend of mine who works at the Fed about his research in an intelligent way, I feel like. I mean, maybe that's my perspective, but I was able to learn after 8 weeks in a class. So to get that perspective that fast, I think we all come in nervous and we all gain a lot.
Yeah, I appreciate your collective openness talking about how you felt coming into the program. I think it's important for folks to be open about that and to share these feelings you have with. I know it may feel like a little bit of a risk with maybe your fellow incoming students, or just to be honest about it, because it is such a universal thing, right? It's been a while since you've been in school. You're going to be in a place where you've got really talented people around you, probably some of the most talented people you've ever met in your life. You're taking classes that you've never taken before. And you're here because of that, right? You're here to stretch and grow, but that can also feel a little bit scary at times, particularly since you're going to be asked to speak about these things, right? The case method, you're going to get called on and you have to offer a perspective. And that's where a lot of the growth happens. But it's also completely normal and human to feel unsure about that. So we try to offer some resources to help you get settled. But just understand, the more you talk about these things with your classmates as you go through the experience, the more you make yourself open to those conversations, the more you'll realize that there's a lot of other people who feel that way. And it really creates a strong foundation for the relationships that you're going to form in this program. So we're starting to get some questions here. And so let's kind of talk a bit about how you've all sort of navigated this sort of the triumvirate of work and life in school. And I recognize we got you folks who are about 18, 19 months into the program. We got folks who are about 5, 6 months into the program at this point. So maybe a little bit more of a work in progress for a couple of our panelists than our second years. But Fabian, can I come to you first? Like, what's been your strategy so far to making all these things kind of coexist?
Accepting that there are going to be times where they just can't. Right. Just to be honest, right? Like, I not this last quarter, it was just really busy at work, and I made what I now know is a fatal mistake, but I had a trip that had to get postponed with a friend that I did the weekend before OGR. And I just like got behind and I just couldn't catch up. Right. And I was like, oh, now I know that I cannot I have to be at home the weekend before an OGR. I just need the time to prep. Right. And even like going into the most recent OGR, right, I was just like, all right, this will not be my best weekend because, it was so busy at work, right, that I was just like, I need to be able to contribute to class and not be like, not contribute to like the detriment of my peers, right, but accept that like I just don't have the time this week to prepare as much as I want to, right? But that means that, I basically have structured my life around balancing, the program and school. So it's really just like something having to come in to interrupt that, right? For that not to happen. And it's waking up earlier, right? Just so I like have time to focus. Cause, once work starts, I just have like constant calls. So like I can't really even take a break to do school stuff. And then, you know, finding that time in the evening. And then like also making sure that I'm spending time with my wife, who's like, incredibly understanding and then understands that this sucks up a lot of times. So like one of the things that we've landed on is like Saturday, I don't do anything school related, right? Like Saturday is just like we're hanging out. You know what I mean? Which is very different than the life that we used to have. I was just complaining that I don't watch TV anymore. And I love TV, but I couldn't tell you the last time I really sat down and like binge something. So like you figure out systems to make it work, but like accept that there are gonna be times that come up where it's just, yeah, I'm not gonna be my best self for this one because it's life happens.
I think that's very important to acknowledge as part of this conversation. I think it can be it's a lot easier to say than to accept. And I think that's something that every executive MBA student wrestles with. I think the four folks who are on this session tonight would tell you they all hold themselves to a very high standard. They kind of have these very high expectations of themselves. To say like this is going to have to be good enough or like I'm just not going to get there this week, that can be psychologically kind of a challenging thing, I think, for executive MBA students, but it's a necessary thing to be able to do something as complicated as an executive MBA program. So just appreciate that note, Fabian, and giving yourself some grace and recognizing like you're trying your best. You have resources available to you. Everybody has a learning team. You have a whole program team that's here to support you. You have classmates, a lot of people to lean on, also people at work and at home to lean on. It takes a whole group of people for an executive MBA student to do all of this.
Yeah,
But
just
being accepting. Yeah,
to
go
add
ahead.
one thing really quickly, Brett, like, for this past weekend, there was a class where like I hadn't even had a chance to like really dig in. And Janie actually shared her spreadsheet with like somebody in my learning team who shared it with me, which was like, oh my God, like I can like read this case and do it with like someone who knows what they're doing and speaks Excel, right? But like being able to learn from that. And then she actually saw me like rewatching a video that like did not explain this concept in a way that I can understand. And I think she saw that I was like a little bit confused and walked up and was like, hey, do you want me to just explain this to you? Right. So like to Brett's point about like everyone relying on each other, like it's an incredibly supportive environment.
Yeah, very much a team sport. If you've known education as like an individual pursuit, that is not this, to be very clear. So, Svetla, how about for you? How have you figured out making your full life and work and school
Well,
coexist?
thank you. I have to agree with Fabian. Even though I thought I was a very organized person, it just hits you. And I just want to tell everyone, be prepared that for the next 2 years, you will be very busy. And just going into that, make sure that you plan things and stick to schedules. Even though I thought I was very organized when it first started, I felt so disorganized. I felt like I couldn't catch my breath. Everything was happening all at once. And it took a while to sort of get into a little, first of all, you have to relax and start relying on everyone around you. And I believe Darden has come up with a wonderful system, this team learning. They're very helpful. And everyone, I don't know how they pick the people, but somehow they do, in a way to where there's always someone that you can rely on for the various subjects. So you don't have to do it 100% on your own. Also lean on your coworkers, lean on your family. Let them know that this is not forever. This is temporary and it will end and you will feel better. But actually kind of once you go into a little groove, so to speak, you kind of find your niche and it gets easier. But at the beginning, when it's like any change, I would imagine it just seems overwhelming. It's a lot. So plan on that and make a plan with your partner, with your children, with work, get everyone involved and you will be fine, especially your learning team.
Janie, how about for you? What's been your approach thus far?
I have 2 kids who are 8 and 6, and between work and school and kids, I'm not doing everything perfectly. I think the grace, giving yourself a little grace that some things are gonna not be done. I mean, if that's like 2 careers, work and kids, and then to add school to those 2 things, you've just added another job. So it means you can't do everything the same level. But I think when I got learning team support. So our learning team, we plan out our workload. We plan out our reading and what we're going to talk about. And the way our learning team, all the learning teams are different. You get assigned this group of 6 and you decide how you're going to work together. And the idea is that we kind of go through it together as a learning team, and then we have class. So we're like prepared for the case, and then we kind of learn whatever we couldn't figure out on our own in class. So that process has really helped, basically having an accountability group, and we cover each other. We cover the topics that maybe I'm good at and the things I'm not good at. We get help from each other. And then at home, having a family understand what I'm going through, and we worked our schedule to support that. So either, for us, that's childcare and knowing that I can't do cases on the weekends. So for me, it's the opposite, Fabian, which is I don't do any prep on the weekends. The prep I do is during the weeks at night. And if it's not done then that's what gets done, or in the early morning or whatnot. So it's just kind of setting yourself those limits and boundaries. It's the same as if you have, you're balancing kids and work. It's the same thing. You've got to set boundaries there and you've got to figure out how to get balance. This is just another thing to balance out. So it's been a great decision, but it's not easy every day. But it's really rewarding to go through it. So that's how it's worked for me.
Yeah, thank you for that, Janie. Jordan, how about for you? What's been your approach?
It's been very similar to what others have said. Lean on your learning team. I think a lot of communication is the key. So communicate with your partner, your family, your loved ones on what this is going to mean, and be clear on how you're going to address it with your learning team or learning partners in school, how you're going to divvy up work. For our group, everyone's going to come in having read everything that they could have, but only 2 people are going to kind of walk us through each given exercise. And then at work, I had a conversation with my boss. It's an evolving conversation, like, oh, this quarter is a really rough quarter. I've got class from 5 to 9 because of a weird fluke of how the schedule works a lot of days. So it's going to be hard. Can I take a few extra days off? Can I shift my schedule? And by and large, I found everyone is rooting for you, wants you to succeed, wants to get you there. Your learning team, because they're in it with you, your cohort the same way. Work, they are excited to see these skills being used, being brought back, and see people grow. And your family just takes pleasure in your successes. So as long as you admit that it's not going to be perfect, you can usually find your path forward. And it gets easier. I mean, it's never easy, but somewhere around halfway through the core, you all of a sudden kind of have found how to navigate it a little bit better.
Yeah, I always tell folks 4 to 6 months. You got to give yourself that. Get through 3 quarters, and get exposed to a fair number of the sort of quantitative courses. Honestly, a lot of them are upfront. For many of our students, they don't have background with those courses. And so those are probably some of the courses they were most nervous about coming in. And so one of the questions that we've gotten here, and I want to talk about it with this group, is like from an admission standpoint, the hardest thing to prepare students for is the time commitment because it is so variable from student to student. It depends on your background. It depends a little bit on what you have going on in your life, what the amount of time you have to devote to school. That's where like doing a working professional program is different than a residential program because a residential program, school is your full-time job. Working professional program, you've got all these other things competing for your time and attention. So the amount of time you may have to devote to school in a given week could be very different than the next week and the week after that. And so there's a fluidity to it. So Svetla, if you had to say like, excluding the synchronous sessions, the distance sessions, how many hours per week do you spend on, school related activities?
I have to be honest, I do spend a lot of time. I know that it's not the same for other people in my learning team, but I do spend I try to do it in little chunks. So I try to do a little bit every day. Otherwise, I don't think I'll manage to do everything at once. And maybe 2-3 hours a day, I would say, if I exclude the weekends. The asynchronous, the OGRs. I'm sorry.
Yeah, it's all right. Weekend residencies, sometimes referred to on grounds residencies or OGRs, as you may have heard that. So, all right, so 2 to 3 hours per day or so for you, Svetla, kind of keeping things in sort of small chunks. How about you, Janie? How many hours per week on average, excluding like the distance sessions, do you feel like you spend on school?
That sounds about right. Probably 1 to 2 hours a day on average is probably about right. Maybe at the most 10 hours a week. The prep for the weeks before OGR is the worst. So an OGR has like for the the core first year, there's about 16 cases. So there's quite a lot of prep, but we get it all pretty far in advance. So depending on the type of person you are and how you manage your time, like what works for your work schedule and home schedule and whatnot. Yeah, I'd say probably, 5 to 10 hours a week is probably about right, on average.
I would note a pro tip here, you want to show up to a weekend residency if you can, having done the case reading already, so that you can really enjoy the weekend residency. So you're not scrambling around trying to read cases. Now, that's in the ideal world. Obviously, there may be weeks where you're just not going to be able to do that. But the best version of this, you will have finished your case reading before showing up so that you can really enjoy things like Friday Night Live and social time with your classmates. And you don't have that sort of stress of additional reading hanging over you.
Well,
Jordan? Oh, go ahead.
Yeah. I was going to say you either do the prep before or you try to do the catch up after. So it ends up being the same amount of work. It's just when you're able to schedule it. So if you don't get to it before the class, then you scramble after the class to try and figure out what it is that you missed. So
yeah, I guess you do it either way. Either way, right? All right, Jordan, how about you? How many hours per week do you feel like you spend on school?
That's about the same number of hours, but I tend to be one who does it in a big chunk. So I spend a weekend trying to get ahead as much as possible. And honestly, what I tend to do is during the exams, I get my exam done like the first 2 days, usually on the weekend, or Friday, Saturday, Sunday. And then that extra week, as long as you're not traveling for a global residency, I can begin to crank through classes. I mix them up, whichever one's kind of stimulating me versus the harder analytic one, so that during the actual week when I'm working focused on work, I can do a little bit lighter lift. But others do it differently, and it all works out. So I think it's finding your rhythm that is the most important. But just getting through the classes, just about every class, I think they seem to target one hour per class, 1 to 1.5, 2 hours per class. So you just have to chunk that up. And because of the way the on-ground residencies work, it's a little bit like a tsunami. You get a flood of material and then a little bit of a lull and then another flood. And you also get used to that as the program goes on, and it doesn't feel as strange anymore.
Yeah, there's a question in the Q&A about which of these things probably feels like a little bit more challenging? I would have to say the on-grounds residencies, based on what you shared, Jordan.
The
That's what it sounds like.
on-ground residency is the most fun. As long as you've like getting ready for it is the flood of reading. But then when you're there, it somehow goes a lot quicker than you think. And you get to do all the things with the people. And if you have scheduled it so that you don't have to do as much work maybe after classes, you get to, do a lot of the social activities, I think, which makes the on-ground residency and cohort building so much fun. And it's really, I think, one of the perks of the program.
All right, Fabian, how about for you? How many? I appreciate all the variation in terms of approach. I think it's really important for people to hear. Like some people do a little bit as they go. Some people like to do it in big chunks. I think that's important.
I would say like what Janie said about 10 sounds right. And that's, the average for me, right? Between averaging OGR prep and synchronous virtual classes. And as for the when, it really depends on what's happening in my life, right? My idealized version is like Sunday, case prep, right? So like, I know that like I have some room in there to like watch football if I want to watch it or like watch a basketball game. But like Sunday is like, I'm not making plans. I'm not doing anything like that. I need to be at home so I can do case prep. And then during the week, whenever I can find that time after work, right? But you have to balance that with I'm meeting with my learning team. I very likely have the virtual sessions, and then even in the weeks leading up to OGR where we don't have virtual sessions, right? That time I use for learning team meetings, right? So like finding time in between learning team / class and work, and then anything I can't get done there, it's like I'm just gonna have to make it work on Sunday. So it means that I have less time to do other things other than case prep on Sundays.
Yeah, the question here in the Q&A about prep for class, it is typically case reading, and the general rule is you have about one case per class. It may be a little bit different than that. Maybe sometimes an A and a B case to look at in one class, but it's generally one case per class. General rule. So, like as mentioned earlier, if you have about 12 or 13 class sessions and a weekend residency, you might have that many cases, maybe even a few more than that. So you get a lot faster at reading cases, though, as you go through the program. It's like any skill, right? When you start off, you're a little bit slow, you're not sure what you're looking for. Then class is going to help you sort of refine your approach, and you get better and better as you go. Let's talk a little bit more about the first year experience. Janie, do you have a favorite class that you've taken thus far? Something that stands out from the 3 quarters or so that you've been in the program?
Well, I mean, the global economics was my favorite class so far. I mean, that's so I'm coming out of like engineering operations. I'm trying to get a better understanding of like what the other areas of the business are focused on. So that's why I'm in this program. Wasn't really to take economics necessarily. That class has been my favorite because it's just I mean, I learned so much in 8 weeks. I think that's why it's my favorite. I think Dan Murphy taught that class. I think I saw is there a class next week that I think it's one of the classes that's available. Highly recommend going to that. How can I articulate it? I feel like when I read the news, I understand what's happening around interest rates. And when there's policies coming out, I got an intuitive understanding of what different government policies were going to do to the economy, interest rates, in a way that I think is hard to articulate. Like I just feel like I have a much broader, high level understanding of what's going on in the world from an 8-week class that was challenging, but totally opened my worldview.
And if you're interested in meeting this person who taught Janie's econ class, Dan Murphy will be hosting a virtual mock class for us next Wednesday. Basically, this same time, 5 to 6:30 p.m. Still time to register. So join us for that. Jordan, when you look back on your first year experience, I recognize you're fully in electives now, but did you have a favorite class from the core curriculum?
I'm going to be honest, I really like to learn. So kind of every class I found something in. I want to say that leading organizations, LO1, I think it was for us, it was in the first quarter. I enjoyed that one a lot, and I enjoyed marketing, whatever the marketing one actually might be called, marketing one. Um, they're very different, but for some reason, the analysis we learned in marketing really stuck with me, and LO made me think of an organization in a different, almost an organic way, thinking of the systems and how they intersect. And so each of those kind of have stuck with me a little bit more than some of the other classes.
Yeah, it's worth noting, and most of the classes have a part one and a part two. So there's a global economies and markets, the econ class part one, which Janie was referring to, and then there's a part two as well. Same for marketing. There's only a few classes that only have one part to them: leadership communication, strategy, and business ethics. Otherwise, it's going to be part one, part two. That's during the core curriculum. Fabian, do you have a favorite class from your time thus far?
I would have said economics. I loved it. You know, Dan is actually who, like, for me, like, crystallizes the, like, that you're here to learn the intuition, right? Where, like, people try to, like, go into the weeds and be like, nah, I'm not doing that. That's not why we're here, right? In a way that I really appreciated. But in addition to that, I'd say leadership communications. I also, my second would have been LO, but that was already taken. Leadership communications, we did something really cool where we learned how to use AI, right, in our work. And I've basically, since that first class, I've been using it at work since, right? I'd already used it some, but I don't think I fully appreciated everything that it offers. So, like, I'll type up my emails, put it in Copilot, and then ask it to, like, clean it up, make it more clear, make it, like, easy to read. So that's something that, like, I've had, like, immediate applications with.
I love that. And your class has been doing something very interesting with leadership communication. Y'all are split into smaller sections within your section, right? So you
Yeah.
have 60 people within your section, but leadership communication, you end up with a group of about 30, I think.
Yeah, it's really nice.
Yeah, and I think it's good for that class because there's a lot of feedback. There's a lot of discussion. All right, Svetla, how about you? Favorite first year class?
This is probably the hardest question. I couldn't come up with a favorite class. And just like Jordan, I have to say everything that we have learned, including the electives, including the core curriculum, everything has been amazing. And I must say that I was extremely impressed by all of the professors. Everyone who taught every single class gave their all, and they were in it to teach with such passion. It was just a great learning experience. And I have to say, even accounting, which is something that most people would consider a boring subject, Paul Simcoe was so entertaining, and he did such a great job making you learn accounting, which, it was really shocking that I actually ended up liking it. But one thing he did say to us, which stuck with me, is he said, just as long as you come to my class, 80% prepared, the rest, it's okay. You don't have to know everything when you come to class. So like everyone else, I liked econ. I like global economics anyway. And you guys, I don't know, you haven't gotten to econ 2, which is even better because it's more global. So I just really can't pick one favorite class, but each class that I have taken has been it's a great experience.
Yeah, for those of you who are real econ people, microeconomics is sort of distributed across the classes that you're taking. There's no econ class specifically focused on micro. It's going to come up in a lot of the classes you're taking, but no specific econ class about that. The econ classes that you're taking are macro focused. It's sort of a philosophical thing here at Darden, if you're curious about that, if you're an econ person. So, Jordan, I wonder, obviously you're looking back on this experience now, but what was most surprising to you? Something you didn't anticipate about your first year experience?
I was surprised how much I liked the case study method. First of all, participation is a significant portion of every class's grade, 40 to 60%. So strategically, it makes sense to participate, but I thought I would have to force myself a little bit more than I found I have to. And then just the cohort. I knew I'd be part of a cohort, but I didn't realize how connected I would become to the cohort. And actually the biggest thing I'm going to miss is having these weekends once a month with these people. And so that is now becoming, an actual thing I am envisioning happening, because I think we've got 2 more residencies left in our program.
Yeah, there's a bittersweet thing that happens. I mean, people are excited you can get some time back in their schedule, but like, how often do you get to do something as great as being with 120 or so people who are all learning and developing, uh, asking these questions of themselves as you go through it? And yeah, one of the key things you'll learn as you go through the program is the difference between just participating and contributing. So contributing to the conversation is different. So it's not just raising your hand and sort of speaking, it's actually adding to the conversation. So if you're worried about like, oh man, do I have to talk all the time? I'm not sure. No, you don't. You don't. You want to figure out how you can add value to the discussion. And really, one of the things that the faculty will tell you about the case method is listening is an underrated part of the case method. Sometimes people focus on the talking part of it. And I understand with the grade piece, yeah, you're probably, that's where your brain went first, but listening is really important. Hearing what your classmates are saying, thinking about how that makes you think differently about what you were going to say, perhaps pivoting from your perspective. That is a huge part of the case method.
And Brett,
Fabian, yeah, go ahead, Jordan.
just real quickly, can I add, and also with the case method, when you eventually remember to start talking with your peers rather than to the professor. So having a conversation with 2 people in class on a topic, especially if it involves their personal experience, that's when it becomes really rich.
Yeah, you believe it or not, the faculty will tell you the best classes that they have are the ones where they are really kind of out of the conversation entirely and students are just talking to each other. That's really a perfect case method discussion. That may be surprising to you for those of you who are more used to a didactic, kind of transmissive, lecture-based environment. But come see a class for yourself. Class visits are a great way to get a feel for that. Fabian, how about for you? What's been most surprising about your first year?
Um, it's realizing that the things that attracted me to the program when I was interested in it and applying aren't BS, right? And like what I mean by that is like, I remember sitting in a class when I did a class visit, and I was like, wow, like that, I could see myself doing that. Like that seems great, right? But I was like, of course, Brett's gonna pick the best class where they're having, great discussions. So like, they can't all be like that, right? And sure, some of them are not that, right? But by and large, like what I saw on the outside is what I'm experiencing now, right? And they didn't pay me to say that. I just want to make that clear. Like what, I'm genuinely surprised by how much it has met my expectations of what the program will be like, especially my most idealistic expectations. It's definitely, yeah, I'd say that that's been the best part. Is like this is when as best as I imagined it would.
Yeah, I appreciate that. When you meet the faculty, you realize how serious they are about what happens in the classroom and the craft of teaching. And they're obviously experts in their field. They research, they publish, they consult, they do all of that work too. But they are 100% serious about being in the class with students, the teaching. That's why they're here at Darden, and they bring that energy to that interaction. Svetla, most surprising thing to you about your first year experience?
Well, I don't know if that counts, but the global residency was my most surprising. Well, there's so many things. One was the global residency, and second, if I have to talk about the case method, I personally am a very timid person. I don't like public speaking. I try to, because I'm foreign, I'm afraid to give an opinion or like, oh, are they going to understand me? And I think being in this classroom with such smart people also puts a layer of intimidation on top of that. But I have found myself surprised that I have felt so comfortable participating and people listening what I have to say, and also, as Brett and everyone else had said already, learning from your peers. That has been incredible experience. And also the global residency. I have to mention that. that was an incredible, out of this world experience. No matter what you think of it, it will be, it's 10 times that. So I highly encourage everyone to do at least 2 so that they can, the level of learning that you get from those global residencies does not compare to any other classroom experience. If I can say that.
Where did you go on your global residency?
Well, because I'm a global executive MBA, I have been to 3 so far. Tomorrow I'm going to Vietnam, but I went to India the first year, and that was an incredible experience. We had wonderful faculty, the companies that we ended up meeting with, the CEOs within these emerging economies. It was you can't learn this in a classroom, and you can put a price tag on this experience. So I highly recommend that.
I appreciate that, Svetla. Janie, something that was surprising to you about your first year, or has been surprising to you about your first year?
I think that the amount of craft that is apparent that goes into the way these courses are constructed, like LR1, when we went through it, every minute was like organized for us to get the most out of it. And even though in the moment you think, why are we doing this? By the end of the week, it was so clear how much effort and energy and research had been put into the way everything was structured to create the environment, the learning environment that we have. And then that's been apparent in every course that we've done. All the professors, you do the first case and you think, what is happening? Why am I doing this? And as you go through the course, you can see the way that it's structured to build this sort of knowledge base that you come to the end and you think, oh, I can speak intelligently with a CFO about why we're making this decision or that decision. And there's so much craft that goes into it that and so carefully selected. The professors are phenomenal. So that was, I knew the reputation of the school, but sometimes once you get in the door, you don't know what to expect. And all the professors and the way that they put together the work for us has been impressive. And I don't know about surprising, but I've been impressed.
No, that's great. And it was mentioned earlier, the sort of environment. You do a lot of work in LR1 to kind of decide how you want to engage with each other, what your norms are going to be, like how, as a section, like that kind of sort of environment doesn't just happen, right? There's a lot of intentionality around sort of crafting a space where people feel comfortable sharing and speaking up and pushing back and all the things that happen in a case discussion. So let's do a lightning round. Very last question here. I recognize we're just a little bit over time, so it's been a very rich discussion to this point. There's been so much advice that has been shared, but I wonder if you have just one final thing for people to think about as they go forward on their MBA journeys. We have admitted students on this call. We have prospective students on this call. Jordan, can I come to you first? Just a piece of advice you would share with folks.
I'm not a traveler, but I did an extra global residency, and I do agree. Do it. You will, if you can do it, you will not be disappointed.
I appreciate that. And Fabian, I think you're heading to India soon, aren't you?
Yeah, I go to India next Thursday. Yeah, I'm really looking forward to it. So that was really great to hear, Svetla. When I saw some of the companies that we were meeting with, I was like, oh my God, like the CEO of Flipkart, that's Jeff Bezos. I'm meeting Jeff Bezos. So one piece of advice, probably just to reiterate what I first said, to like give yourself grace and acknowledge that this is an incredibly time-consuming, yet rewarding thing. And like sometimes you're just not going to be able to give 100% to everything, and like there are other things going on in your life. But over the balance of the program, you're gonna, get a lot out of it.
Butler, a piece of advice?
Use all the resources that you can. Take everything that Darden has to offer, and there's so much. It's not just the core classes. There's so much that Darden is offering. They have an amazing career center. They have these global residency. I also took advantage of the global client project, which is in essence, you're working for like an entire year with a company. I'm doing consulting work for a data center, and this is credit for it counts towards Darden. There's so much that just ask questions. You will not be disappointed. And in the same time, just have fun and enjoy.
Yeah, I think that's something that's worth remembering, right? Just to have the space to go to class. We had a finance faculty member, Michael Ho, who, when we had one of these sessions about preparing for the academic experience, he said, look, I don't want you to think about class as drudgery. This this is actually exciting. This is a joyful thing to be able to sit in class and to learn. Like, isn't that great? Isn't that why you're here? Isn't that exciting to you? It should be. And you shouldn't look at it as a burden. And I thought that's a great perspective, because sometimes when we start talking about all this stuff, the time starts to sound like a lot, and oh, you're adding all this to your plate, et cetera, this kind of language. But at the end of the day, you're learning, which is exciting, which is something that I think, if you're thinking about this kind of program, likely you draw energy from and you're excited about. So, all right, Janie, you get the last word.
I think the advice that I got, and I'll pass on, is to make sure that you spend time on the networking and the relationships piece of this. I think all this classwork is phenomenal, but one of the biggest value elements that you're getting is this network, both for professional development and then future career connections, both alumni and then the cohort that you have. So to spend that, save space for the social, save space for the conversations. The best professional networking conversations I've had have been in the lobby at the hotel at OGR, like in passing after class, but have been really valuable for me moving forward in my career journey. And also double tap on the career resources. Excellent, like so many career resources and support available, and a strong network. So
Yeah, I appreciate that point. The full value of the experience. It's not just what happens in class, it's also the people around you, the relationships that you develop. And I love the point about just taking advantage of everything. You have a great opportunity while you're here in school. You have a career team around you. You have all these classmates who do interesting things. You have faculty available to you. Just so many different resources to leverage. Try to maximize it if you can. You really only get to go through this experience one time. This is your one and only time to do an MBA. So why not do as much as you possibly can? So I want to thank our panelists for their time and for their perspectives and for their candor tonight. I want to thank our attendees for being here. Thank you for registering. Thank you for joining us tonight. As always, we've recorded this session and we'll share out a link to the recording. So if you want to go back and review any part of the conversation, lots of good tips and advice were shared. And I'll just mention, from an admissions standpoint, still very early in our admission cycle. We have a number of upcoming executive MBA deadlines. The next one is March 10. And I will plug the virtual mock class next week with Dan Murphy. Obviously, he's been spoken of very highly here, and rightfully so. I think you'll really enjoy Dan. So join us for that. It's a great opportunity to test drive the distance portion of the program. If you haven't ever been on a live Zoom class and you're wondering, how's the case method work? How does this happen via Zoom? It does, and it's a great chance for you to kind of test drive that. And of course, you can always welcome and encouraged to join us for an in-person class visit. Our next opportunity to do that will be in March 22nd on that Saturday. So thank you all, and have a wonderful evening.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye, everyone.
thank you. See you, Brett.
And that was a conversation with current Executive MBA students discussing the first year or the core curricular period of the Executive MBA program. As always, if you have any comments, suggestions, requests, anything you'd like for us to cover here on the podcast, we're all ears. We can be reached at exec, that's EXEC, MBA @darden.virginia.edu. Until next time, stay safe, be well, and thanks for listening.